Hello, everyone, and inside today's Locked On Canadiens, the Montreal Canadiens have fired two members of their athletic training staff. Is Patrick Waugh going to be back behind the bench inside the Atlantic Division sooner rather than later? What does that mean for the Canadiens? And we have even more listener trade proposals inside today's show.
You are Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 866 of Locked On Canadiens. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. We are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast, where you get your team every single day of the week, wherever you get your daily podcast, Google, Apple, Spotify, or if you're watching us on YouTube. Thank you so much. We are available there as well. I am one of your hosts. I am Scott Matla, and I am joined, as always, by the active stick, Laura Saba. It is a cooler, rainier day in Buffalo, New York here. Game 5 of the NHL Stanley Cup Final is going down right now. Laura, you and I are both very ready for the draft and the end of postseason hockey at this point because, well, the Canadiens haven't given us much so far through this offseason.
Yeah, like when you get to this point in the hockey season, when your team isn't that great, and when you watch and talk about hockey 5 days a week like we do, and our team isn't good, when you get to this point, you just can't wait for it to be over because there's so much fun stuff in the offseason. Like when your team is rebuilding, and I have to say, it is more fun to go on a Stanley Cup run after beating the Toronto Maple Leafs after it was 3-1. But in the absence of that, I think now is a really exciting time to be a Canadiens fan and to be a Canadiens podcaster. For you guys, just to know, peek behind the curtain, there's so many prospect and scouting experts that we want to have on that we can barely fit them in our schedule in the next few weeks. And they're all so wonderful. They're so great. And I can't wait for all of you to listen to content that's coming from them. But at the same time, after the draft takes place, there's still going to be stuff that we're going to talk about because the Canadiens currently, as it stands, have more than 10 picks. My estimation is that they're going to end up with about 10 picks when all is said and done after all the trades. And there's going to be so much to talk about even after the draft. Like, this is such a great time for a fan of a crappy team. It's just exciting. I know that's not what we're going to talk about today, but I just want to promise everybody that we're going to have so much fun and there's going to be so much knowledge being dropped here from all of our favorite experts.
Yeah, and before we do get back into draft season, and trust us, we have plenty. David saying that we will be on Wednesday night for our Thursday episode, and Friday night we are recording a very special live episode with one of our favorite people in the world. But before we get any further, the Montreal Canadiens have made some more off-season changes here. They have let Chief Physiotherapist Donald Baumforth and Chief Athletic Therapist Graham Reinbend go. They've been relieved of their duties with the Montreal Canadiens. First reported by Tony Marinaro of the Sick Podcast. Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton both spoke at length during their postseason presser or end of season press conference, and any other time that they have been asked, is that they are going to look into what can we do about the injuries here. We're going to assess everything and take a look and see what we can do. Very clearly, that answer was they found there was something here they did not like. There was something in terms of the way players were treated with their injuries and recovery, or something along those lines that they did not like, based on not one, but two historically bad seasons of injuries for the Montreal Canadiens here. And they went, enough is enough. It's one thing to be bad where, hey, maybe the kids are playing a lot. When the young guys are getting injured, some not their fault. Arbor Jacki separated his shoulder in a fight. Cole Caulfield got an awkward hit, separated his shoulder. That is not the fault of the athletic training staff, but potentially either letting players stay in games or coming back too soon in terms of maybe the recovery wasn't good enough. Enough is enough. One season is bad luck. 2 seasons is getting highly suspicious. I don't think Kent Hughes was interested at all at finding out what a third season of potential record-setting injuries would look like for a team that needs to make some forward progress here. I'm surprised. I'm not surprised they made moves. I'm just surprised Reinbend is one of the names that I've seen in there because he has been around the Canadiens organization a long, long time. But it's better to now be proactive and start looking to change things here. Proactive would have been maybe changing things last year, but it's better than waiting until the regular season comes around and everything piles up again. But yeah, Canadiens are slowly starting to make changes, and Kent Hughes is going to put a stamp on maybe what the new age Montreal Canadiens look like.
Yeah, I think what happened here was that they took a good look at the way things happened. And again, it was 2 seasons in a row. The first season could be a fluke, it could be bad decision making. But I think that there's an old school mentality that they might have wanted to change. I mean, if you look at these players, not these players, the staff, they're well regarded and they're longtime, members of the Canadiens or in the NHL. But at the same time, like the old school mentality of trying to play through injuries is not going to cut it anymore. Right now, you look at even the way that the athletes' diets have changed over the last 10, 15 years. You look at the way their off-season training has changed over the last 10, 15 years. Like the mentality around their day-to-day taking care of themselves has to change as well. So you can't really have a staff that will allow Brendan Gallagher to get away with getting back on the ice at all costs. You can't really have a staff that will allow somebody to pretend they're doing okay just so that they can get the green light and get back on the ice. Because that's the players even admit to it, when they're asked about by the media about the number of injuries that they sustained this season. And, we know that the medical staff and the training staff and all of that has been criticized by the fans, the media, us on this podcast. We ask questions, right? We don't have that medical knowledge, but we ask questions because this is egregious. 2 seasons in a row of constant man games lost and some historic degree as well. So I think the question needed to be asked, and I think that the way that the Canadiens maybe approach health is changing. It's not necessarily, it's these 2 people that got fired that were the problem. It's more, let's change our entire mentality. And given the opportunity, the excuse, and the reason to change things out, maybe Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton were like, let's modernize that as well. Let's have a situation where players prioritize their rest. I mean, that's kind of the way it's going now in everything else. It should be going that way in sports as well. It's just not okay for you to constantly be putting yourself in danger of long-term injury for short-term gain, particularly in a season where you're not expected to contend. And in fact, a worse finish is better for you. Getting back on the ice at all costs should not be the way that they do it. Recovery should be prioritized. So obviously last season you could have called it a fluke, but 2 seasons in a row, that's a pattern, that's a problem. And so for me, I want to see if next season a lot of these players have maybe they take longer injury recovery time, but they come back and are able to sustain their health for longer periods of time once they return from injury. That's what I'll be watching for.
And I guess part of that is discretion is the better part of valor. Is you can be smart. Don't sacrifice the long-term gain for we want to win a couple of games or not go on a losing streak right now. We will see what else the Canadiens do in terms of staff shakeup in the coming weeks here. But speaking of staff shakeups, that's real easy on the tongue after a long day at work. Patrick Roy is rumored to be back around the NHL thanks to the Senators getting a new owner. And no, the new owner is not Arbor Jackeye. We will talk about how all that ties together and how that affects the Montreal Canadiens coming up next. But first, as I mentioned off the top of the show, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, and it is the best time to sign up with FanDuel because right now new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's right, that's $2,500 in bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Great promotions every day. Bet the money line, bet same game parlays, anything you can possibly think of in baseball, the end of the hockey season, golf, everything. They have you covered in a safe, secure app, and you can get paid out instantly at FanDuel. So if you visit fanduel.com/lockdown and get a no sweat first bet up to $2,500 right now, that's fanduel.com/lockdown. FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA, and us here at Locked On. As always, please remember to gamble responsibly when you are using FanDuel. We have so much good content for y'all this week. David St. Louis will be joining us from Elite Prospects for tomorrow's episode. We're going to talk Ryan Bacher. We're going to talk a little Ryan Leonard, maybe a little Ethan Gauthier. If you have any questions, please tweet them at us at LO_Canadiens. We'll put out a call for maybe a few questions here to kind of surprise David with during the show, as always. And then Friday, be at the Locked On Canadiens YouTube channel. Friday, 7:30 p.m. Get your popcorn ready. We're going a full hour of just live draft questions, prospect Q&A stuff with one of our favorite people. We will announce that after David's episode because we are kind people. Speaking of people who may or may not be kind behind the bench, Patrick Roy just won a Memorial Cup as both an owner and a coach of the Quebec Remparts of the QMJHL. Phenomenal postseason for the team. He left the team. He stepped away from the Remparts, which makes me think he was already had something lined up here because he's got one of the most successful QMJHL franchises in front of him. They make good money. They just got a brand new arena. I believe he's still part owner of the team. He's probably just not doing as much managerial stuff. And the question becomes, well, where's he going? All the coaching positions are full. The Ottawa Senators have a new owner, and it is a current owner of the Montreal Canadiens, technically. Michael Andlauer, who is a minority owner in the Montreal Canadiens, who was the GM for the Hamilton Bulldogs when they were the Habs AHL affiliate, and he is the one responsible for moving the Belleville Bulls to Hamilton, Ontario in the OHL for the Hamilton Bulldogs OHL team, and now he will oversee the Belleville Senators as well. He is the new owner of the Ottawa Senators. His $950 million bid was accepted. The long national nightmare is over. No thanks to Justin Trudeau, that rapscallion there in Parliament. I don't think he has anything to do with this. I just wanted to say rapscallion on this podcast.
You are feeding a section of our listeners that are going to have so many comments tomorrow.
I don't know if it's about rapscallion or Justin Trudeau, and I'm not going to elaborate further on that. But Andlauer's the new owner.
I will liberally delete. If we go too off topic in the comments, I will liberally delete your comments, guys. Okay, we want to talk about Patrick Roy and the Ottawa Senators. That's what we want to do.
I have a joke about your terminology there that I'm going to let slide on that, just because I don't want to feed into this any further. But two things now have come out with this. One, it was Steve Dangle who mentioned that, hey, hearing that Steve Staios, GM of the Hamilton Bulldogs of the OHL, a guy that Andlauer hired so Toronto, the Maple Leafs, would not hire him, is likely to become one of the new GMs for the Ottawa Senators. What that means for Pierre Dorion, not a clue. It's a very weird situation.
Special advisor situation, maybe. Here's the thing. Can I just get on my soapbox for a second?
Absolutely.
All right. So Michael Andlauer is a diehard, lifelong Montreal Canadiens fan, right? He's part owner of the Montreal Canadiens for a reason. He was the owner of their farm team for a very long time. I actually met Michael Andlauer, and he gave me a ride to my hotel in Pittsburgh because my cab didn't show up. He let me borrow his car, or he let me go in the car that he hired. He's such a nice guy. He was so great. I truly adore him for that reason. I don't really know him very well, but he's just I'll never forget that kindness. But he's a Canadiens fan. So in my head, the canon in my head right now is that he's going to ruin the Ottawa Senators from within for us. Or what he's going to do, and this is my dream, is he's going to not compete with the Montreal Canadiens, but rather spend his entire time trying to be a thorn in the side of the Toronto Maple Leafs and just do everything he possibly can to hamper their success. That is what my dream for Michael Andlauer is. And I hope that that's what he ends up doing.
It is very funny that a Montreal Canadiens fan from Toronto now owns the Ottawa Senators after years of the Leafs and Habs owning the Senators on the ice. But what goes along with that is, and this is, it's been rumored basically since the Memorial Cup field was set and Patrick Waugh's team won the QMJHL playoffs, is that Waugh will be back in the NHL. We thought maybe the Rangers, maybe it'll be this. And the thing is, Kevin Weeks reported this, which I think gives it a little bit of gravity to it, is that Patrick Waugh seems to be the guy who will be going to Ottawa. And I have two thoughts on this. One, Martin St. Louis versus Patrick Waugh on the bench is going to be very, very fun because we're going to see if Patrick Waugh has learned to calm down at all as a hockey coach. Has he? I don't know. I don't watch a lot of the QMJHL, so I can't possibly know what antics he has gotten up to since leaving the NHL all those years ago, walking out. The other thought I have is, as a coach in Colorado, yes, they were a very good team because they got very good goaltending. One of the Ottawa Senators' biggest issues facing them this year is inconsistent goaltending. They were a team that was not always great defensively, had poor goaltending, but could score a ton. If this sounds familiar, because that is just Patrick Waugh's Colorado Avalanche all over again. Pure chaos. They will have a great first year. They will be absolutely fired up to play for the Hockey Hall of Famer, the legend that is Patrick Waugh. And then it'll wear thin if it doesn't get successful because Waugh can be demanding. And we're going to see, what has he learned? My biggest thing is, the first game that Ottawa is back in Montreal, you're going to have Patrick Waugh on the Senators bench, and you just know the storyline is going to be he wants to beat the Habs. Why didn't the Habs hire him? Why didn't the Habs do this? Was Martin St. Louis the right choice when Patrick Waugh was there with experience? The narratives are going to be out of control. I feel like this is going to take the spice level of Habs Senators from let's say medium hot chicken wings at whatever place you go to like the top of the hot ones chain. Because it adds an extra wrinkle in there because it is a club legend in Patrick Waugh that will be behind the bench for another team. The Habs don't have that same rivalry with Tampa Bay, so Martin St. Louis doesn't get that same thing. It's Patrick Waugh. What more can I say on that? I know I'm not from Quebec, and I know that he and Mario Tremblay oddly buried the hatchet in a McDonald's commercial and everything. But I gotta say, I'm kind of looking forward to it and also dreading a potential Habs Senators game even more at this point.
I just want chaos, to be honest. I would love for Patrick Waugh to be a coach of anywhere because it's chaotic. It's just not the Montreal Canadiens. I'm very happy with Martin St. Louis as coach, but also I envision a world where it's all like relatively recent former players just all coaching and just having like vendettas against each other and just like not letting like their playing days go. That's another one of my hockey fanfics. But I think it would be so funny. It would be so funny. Other people write fanfic about like, players loving each other and stuff. Like my fanfic is all petty rivalries. But I think it would be so entertaining. And honestly, the Ottawa Senators, like they've been such a story off the ice for so long that I would really love for them to be a story on the ice now. It would be so fun. It would be hilarious. I just don't want them to beat the Montreal Canadiens. And I think it's going to be a while, though, before the Montreal Canadiens are good enough to own them night in and night out. I just think it would be hilarious. And then the question becomes, like, we know that Alex DeBrincat, did I just call him Adam? No, I thought I just called him Adam. Anyway, DeBrincat, we know he doesn't want to come back, but what if Patrick was the coach? Maybe he wants to come back and just for shiggles.
I mean, the way I see it is I don't want them to succeed on or off the ice because I don't like my rivals succeeding because that's not good for us. However, we will wait and see on this. It feels like this is snowballing downhill. It'll only be a matter of time. And once we do break out the narratives, it'll be a good time. We have so much more coming up in this episode. In our final segment, we have more of your listener trade proposals, the good, the bad, and the absolutely Michael Pezzetta staring a hole through you crazy. And that's all coming up next. We are back here at Locked On Canadiens. Remember, be subscribed. Don't miss our episode with David St. Louis tomorrow. We're recording. We're talking prospects for the NHL draft. And then we have a very special episode on Friday and the mailbag on Thursday. How could I ever possibly forget? Tweet us your questions at LO_Canadiens. Laura, I know you have some of our listener trade proposals. We can get to 2, maybe 3, depending on how detailed they are before we have to wrap the show up tonight.
Our friend Randy Hansen says, just because I need a little crazy in my life. To Montreal, Pierre-Luc Dubois and Thomas Caron. And then to Winnipeg, Yessi Ylönen, Christian Dvorak, Jaden Struble, and Calgary's first of 2024. I believe it is the Sean Monahan extremely long biblical trade that he's talking about.
Oh, I'm not 100% sure on giving Calgary's first in that, just because we don't know where Calgary is at as a team. New GM, new coach, roster that's in a bit of an upheaval spot. Some of their core pieces are getting older. I'm not Ylönen, I can see parting with in that trade. I can. Dvorak to make the money work. I'm not crazy on giving both Struble and a first-round pick there. Struble's, got his entry-level deal, looked really good with the Rocket last year. And like I said, I don't know if I love giving up Calgary's first before we know what they are at this point. And it's like we talked a little bit in the Dubois episode. Apparently other teams are interested now, including LA and New York and Minnesota and all this. And at what point do you just realize it's not worth giving up all this excess cap and money and assets for a guy who maybe he doesn't actually want to be here at all? Who knows? So maybe chop a little off of that, but always down for chaos in terms of Pierre-Luc Dubois.
I think, this is one of the ones where it was like, oh, it's a bold trade idea. It's like, because people were having a lot of fun with the topic. And I would like to encourage you all to continue to have fun with the topic because, we're getting a lot going. Everything that you propose, people will comment on or send us emails about. Like, there's a lot of discussion. So we love that. There's one from our friend Claude S. Bold prediction. Gallagher will be trending towards a 35-goal season by the trade deadline, upping his value. The trade would be the Canadiens trade Gallagher and that convoluted 2025 pick they got for Sean Monahan to Arizona. And then Arizona retains salary and trades Gallagher to Edmonton for another high draft pick. The result is the Habs get cap space. It says here Anaheim gets building blocks. I think he means Arizona.
Yeah.
And then Edmonton gets some much needed character for a cup run.
So my question in that is, what are the Habs getting out of this? I don't feel the need to shed a healthy Brendan Gallagher salary. If he's trending towards 35 goals and is still signed long-term, why are you jettisoning that when that's exactly what this Canadiens team needs and not getting anything in return? This is not a guy who is like Shea Weber, who is never going to play again, or someone who is broken down and busted. It's, if you're trading Brendan Gallagher, one, I still think Vancouver is going to be the team that trades for him, rightly or wrongly. Vancouver, Edmonton just makes too much sense in that regard. And Edmonton, if they miss out on Travis Konechny, who they're apparently interested in, Brendan Gallagher fits that mold and might not cost him as much because of his age, because of his contract numbers and everything. And I think you can get a prospect out of that by just trading with them straight up. Yeah, maybe you take on a year of a bad contract from them or something, but you free up cap space and you get a piece added on in that. So I'd be more willing to entertain it without the shenanigans because I'd like the Canadiens to get something back in that trade, because I'm not convinced that Gallagher's totally washed to being a Sean Monahan level cap write-off.
So because we're on the topic of PLD, and there's tons of emails about PLD, which we'll probably get around to for our mailbag this week, there was sort of a not so spicy trade proposal from our friend Habrichadabra, who actually hashed this out with Garrett Hull. All right. This might be obsolete by the time you read this, but here's a deal that was actually hashed out between myself and Garrett Hull. So, obviously, this is the Montreal fan and the Winnipeg fan. PLD plus a 6th or 7th rounder for Christian Dvorak plus Armia plus Barron plus a 2nd plus a 4th or 5th rounder. That was the Winnipeg side. And then in counter, I'd either offer a left-handed defenseman, such as Engstrom, Norlinder, or Struble, and throw in Primo, but I could live with this. Also, you could get, is it Heinola or Heinola?
Heinola.
Heinola, a disgruntled left-handed defenseman that might cost pick number 31, and flip him for a young right defenseman to replace Barron. So, like, all of this is like, I feel like this is like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But again, I still feel like the Canadiens would be giving up too much for PLD in this scenario.
I need you to not absolutely kill my mentions for this. I'm actually okay with the initial Winnipeg offer there. I like the counter offer of potentially getting a Ville Heinola in this because he's someone who, by all the metrics, has played well in his limited minutes for the Jets. It's just both Paul Maurice and Rick Bowness don't seem to like the riskier upside. And for that, I go, okay, you let someone thrive. I don't know if I'm not sure who's going to be better out of Heinola or Barron. I've seen, obviously, a lot of Barron in both the AHL and NHL this year, and I've seen a lot of Ville Heinola in the AHL playing against the Rocket, and he's always been very good. You shed some cap. You're getting rid of Dvorak. You're getting rid of Armia. You're not giving up a potential first in this. 4th and a 5th or a 2nd and something. I can live with that, because it feels more balanced along there. It's going to be 75 cents in change rather than a dollar bill being exchanged, if that makes a lot of sense. And if you get Heinola back and he's great, cool. If you don't see a long-term fit for him and you boost his profile, you just flip him again. It's like, hey, we got this young guy, and he's got a really affordable contract because the Jets tanked all of his value. He turned into a steady NHL player, power play 2, good puck mover. Teams who need that in the playoffs, then you flip him for something else if he doesn't want to fit there, or you make room for him and you don't rush one of the other prospects like a Struble or someone else in the system, and it works out well. I actually really like the back and forth there, that it wasn't like, oh, we're going to get Lane Hudson in this. Oh, you're going to get like a 5th and be grateful for it. The fact of the matter is this is probably the most realistic one we've looked at yet, because there's salary matching, there's pick exchange, there's some prospect, leveraging and everything in here. And I'm okay with that.
And that's the thing. We're not always just going to do spicy trade proposals. We're going to do some fairly mild white people trade proposals. I'm sorry. That was mean. Season your chicken, people. But at the same time, I think that don't come at me. Okay. This episode went way off the rails. We're really tired. Technology's not been our friend. But I did want to say thank you to everybody, because here's the thing too, is that I asked for topic ideas and people are emailing in topic ideas. And I know that seasoning chicken wasn't one of them, but keep these coming. It's a lot of PLD right now, but at the same time, also somebody has to remind me what I promised to do. I was supposed to read the terms of the Sean Monahan trade, but I can't remember if I was supposed to be like doing hot sauce consumption or whatever it is. That's an off-season topic that I promised you last off-season.
So, season your chicken. Subscribe to Locked On Canadiens wherever you get your daily podcasts, Google, Apple, Spotify. Watch us here on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed by Friday. I don't want to hear you complaining because you missed out on the live stream where you get to ask questions to a draft expert before the draft. And it's going to be a good time. It's going to be a little off the rails. It's going to be a little PG-13-ish within reason, because we still have to post the episode and not get fined anyways. Make sure you are following us on Twitter at @LO_Canadiens. Follow Laura at The Active Stick for more chicken seasoning tips and also just general advice. Follow me if you are clinically insane and like caffeine. Folks, we will see you all tomorrow with David St. Louis of Elite Prospects.